the 17th of December, 1944. The pre-dawn chill hung over Hansfeld, Belgium. SS Commander Joachim Peiper stood among 50,000 gallons of captured American fuel. For a moment, his hopes for Germany's Ardennes offensive surged. But as his men refueled their tanks, one chilling realization set in. If the Americans could afford to abandon this much fuel, the war was already lost. Peiper had discovered not just gasoline, but the crushing weight of American industrial power. In late 1944, Germany launched Operation Watch on the Rhine, a desperate attempt to turn the tide. The plan? Push through the Ardennes and split the Allied forces. But behind this bold move was a fatal flaw. Germany didn't have the fuel. Hitler gambled that his elite SS units would capture enough American supplies along the way. At the same time, the United States was operating on an entirely different level. With petroleum pipelines stretching across France and the Red Ball Express delivering thousands of tons of supplies daily, American forces in Europe were consuming over 1 million gallons of fuel a day and receiving even more. Peiper's Kampfgruppe was the tip of the spear. His tanks were powerful, but thirsty. The Tiger alone burned over 2 gallons of fuel per mile. The math didn't add up. Peiper had just 31,000 gallons for a 65-mile mission. When his tanks rolled into Hansfeld on the 17th of December, they found more fuel than they'd seen in months. Thousands of jerry cans left behind by retreating Americans. Hot coffee still steamed in cups. Fires still burned in oil drums. The supply point wasn't even a major depot, just a forward dump for the US 99th Infantry Division. Peiper's officers realized the Americans had abandoned more fuel in one depot than most German units received in half a year. They had captured 50,000 gallons, enough to move forward, but it wasn't victory. It was revelation. If the US could leave this behind without blinking, Germany was in trouble. By comparison, Germany's synthetic fuel production had been shattered. Allied bombers had reduced it by 90%. The Luftwaffe was grounded. Training flights had been slashed. Civilians hadn't seen gasoline in years. Peiper's fuel strategy was desperation masked as planning. His orders were clear. Engines off after 5 minutes idle, capture fuel above all else. But the terrain slowed them down. Narrow roads, muddy tracks, resistance from a single US platoon held them up for 10 hours. The tanks sat idling, wasting precious gallons. They reached another depot in Stavelot containing 2 million gallons, but US engineers torched it. The sky filled with black smoke as American officers ordered, "Deny the enemy at all costs." Similar scenes played out across the Ardennes. In just 1 week, Americans burned over 8 million gallons rather than let the Germans have it. Peiper watched the inferno in stunned silence. One of his officers reportedly said, "They can afford to burn it. What are we doing here?" The Americans weren't running out. They were stockpiling. They were flying in fuel by the ton. Their pipelines pumped 1 million gallons daily. One truck convoy system alone consumed more fuel than Germany's entire Army Group B received in a month. Peiper advanced a few more miles. At La Glise, his tanks finally stopped. Not because of enemy fire, but because their tanks were dry. Of the 119 tanks and assault guns that began the offensive, only 39 remained and none could move. The Americans surrounded Peiper's forces. With no fuel, the Germans destroyed their own vehicles and fled on foot. What Peiper discovered at Hansfeld wasn't just a depot. It was the end of an illusion. The war was already lost, not through courage or combat, but through capacity. Germany had elite soldiers and deadly machines, but America had factories, oil fields, and a logistics machine that could casually burn millions of gallons to win a single battle. In war, strategy matters, courage matters, but by 1944, industrial power mattered more. Germany had skill, America had scale. The Battle of the Bulge wasn't just fought in the forests of Belgium, it was fought in refineries in Texas, on pipelines under the sea, and in convoys racing across Europe. And that's where the war was truly won.